Hello everyone! We just had a super cool eclipse today, and what better way to celebrate it than with some coding? Today, we're going to take a look at switch statements. It'll be the second of our conditional execution video tutorials. Let's jump right in. If we execute an ls here, we can see we already have a file named switch.c, so we'll just clear that out with echo again. And we can see that it worked. Nothing in there. And let's hop right to it. Like most of our introductory programs, we are going to need standard IO.h, and we're going to use the same pattern for our main we always do. It's going to return an integer, going to be named main, going to take an integer called argc, which we'll actually be using this time, and a vector of character vectors named argv. Always make sure you remember to return 0. And the switch statement is a little more complicated than if statements, but it's pretty simple. So we're going to use the word switch, and then we need a variable. I believe this can be any expression that evaluates to an integer, but it's easiest and most readable if you make it a variable. In this case, argc. And we set off a block of code for it with the curly braces. And what's going to conditionally execute are cases. So, case 0, we are going to printf. Don't forget your new line. Number of arguments is 0. And you need to have a break here. You can get away without it in certain circumstances, but if you don't have it, the rest of your cases will also execute. And that is not what we want. Although we will go back at the end and just show it off, because it's important to recognize common errors when you're coding. It saves you a lot of time if you just know the stuff. Number of arguments is 1. And the break. And there is a special one that you can have called default. Default will be what triggers if nothing else does. I tend to like to put a break in here for uniformitarianism purposes. That was an awkward sense. For uniformity. But you don't need one, so we'll skip it this time. Number of arguments is something else. And a happy little new line. I'm the Bob Ross of coding. I probably shouldn't say that. That's inviting disaster. So, at this point, we should be ready to compile and execute. GCC is the compiler, -ANSI to force ANSI compliance, -O for our output file, switch.o, and our input file, switch.c. Hey, no errors again. That doesn't happen very often. And execute it with a little /. Number of arguments is 1. What a strange thing to have. I believe it's counting the name of the program as an argument. If we give it an argument, let's call it kitty. Number of arguments is something else. Alright, so it looks like you can't have 0 arguments, at least not in the usual case. Probably important to keep in mind for later, but it doesn't really affect this tutorial. Now, let's go back in and make some edits. Nano is the name of our editor. And we will just go ahead and get rid of these breaks. And we'll add in a couple more cases just so you can really see what's going on with it. that. There we go. White space doesn't matter in C, but it's nice to keep it all nice and neat anyway. How did that have extra spaces up yet? Oh well. Number of arguments is 2. Number of arguments is 3. And we don't have any breaks, so we should see some craziness coming out when we do this one. Recompile with our GCC line. And execute. Number of arguments is 2. Number of arguments is 3. Number of arguments is something else. Obviously that makes no sense. Remember those breaks. But there might be cases where that is something you actually want to have happen, so I thought I would show it off here. I think the last thing we want to do is go back in and fix that up so it makes sense. Put our handy dandy break in. Recompile it. And just to prove that this isn't complete craziness, we'll put in some extra arguments. Kitty 2. Kitty 3. Number of arguments is something else. Number of arguments is 3. And that is how the switch case statement works. I hope you all learned something today, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.